Good evening, this is Pamela, and you are listening to Watchman on the Pod. We are going to continue with our book reading today with Billy Graham and His Friends by Dr. Cathy Burns. And we are in chapter 4 still, and this is part 4. Canaan Banana. Canaan Banana was the former president of Zimbabwe and an official in the WCC. He holds an anti-scriptural and Marxist views. At the 1980 Australian WCC meeting, the outright denunciation and overthrow of capitalism was demanded by Reverend Canaan Banana. He says, "When I look at a gorilla, I see Jesus Christ. The gorilla dies that we may live." He also noted, quote, "As for me, I am not ashamed of the revolution, for it is the power of the people unto salvation." Unquote. What a misrepresentation of Scripture. The Bible says in Romans 1:16, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes." Banana also said, quote, "In the final analysis, it is not so much a social struggle as a class struggle, poor against rich, oppressed against oppressor. Each historical situation will determine the choice of the method the poor will use to achieve their ultimate goal of changing the system and building socialism." Unquote. Recently, Banana was found guilty of 11 counts of sodomy and attempted sodomy with his bodyguards, cooks, gardeners, while he was president. Dr. William Patton was a co-secretary of the WCC. He remarked, quote, "Collectivism is coming, whether we like it or not." Unquote. Brian Wyndham, an Australian pastor, attended the WCC's conference on world mission and evangelism, which was held in Melbourne, Australia in 1980. He wrote, quote, "At this conference, Marxism preempted everything. The liturgy, the songs, the addresses, the questions, the bookstall, the voluminous free literature, everything. Revolution was in the atmosphere." Unquote. Quote, one of Pastor Wyndham's friends, also having his first personal look at the WCC, commented, "I had not seen the sign, World Council of Churches, on the gate, and I had not known what I was visiting. I would have thought that I strayed into a Communist Party workshop." Wyndham concluded, "In every session, every paper, and almost every brochure and poster, I was being peppered, even pounded with Marxist philosophy." Unquote. Benjamin Chavez. Benjamin Chavez was a former president of the NCC, as well as the former executive director of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. He was also a member of the Clinton-Gore transition team. He is, quote, "a pioneer in what has been called environmental racism." Unquote. Chavez, like Jackson, King, Lyons, etc., has had his own hijinks with women and money. He bragged that his ministry has always been ecumenical and interfaith. There is a linkage between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and Chavez, believes that there should be a greater trialogue, not a dialogue, but a trialogue between those three great revealed religions. Unquote. In 1997, he announced he is converting to Islam and becoming a member of Reverend Louis Farrakhan's Nation of Islam. He claims that he still believes in Jesus Christ, but he expects his announcement to shock many of his Christian friends and fellow members of the clergy. He also insists that he really isn't changed. He states, "If you pour water from one glass to another glass, the composition of the water is the same. I am who I am. And there is but one God. The God of Judaism is the God of Christianity, is the God of Islam. So if we all serve the same God, why can't we all work together?" Unquote. The problem is, however, that we are not serving the same God. The God of Islam differs drastically from the God of Christianity. The Islamic God is called Allah. He was a moon god who married the sun goddess. Together they produced three goddesses who were called the daughters of Allah. These three goddesses were called Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and Emanat. The Encyclopedia of Religion mentions that Allah is a pre-Islamic name corresponding to the Babylonian Bel. Bel, or Baal, by the way, is another name for Satan. The Encyclopedia of Religion mentions that Allah Oh, I already did that. The Jesus Christ of Islam is also different. Muslims do not believe that Jesus was the Son of God or that he was crucified. In spite of the differences between Christianity and Islam, a Muslim leader addressed the National Council of Churches for the first time in 1996. Also, Chavez claims that when water is poured from one glass to another, it remains the same. However, if the glass into which the water is poured is dirty, the water will also become dirty. If the water itself is dirty, it will make a clean glass dirty. Just suppose I had a glass of pure water in my hand and you are holding a glass of muddy water. It wouldn't hurt you to compromise with me by mixing your water with mine, but it would matter greatly to me to compromise with you by mixing my water with yours. Instead of a glass of pure water and a glass of contaminated water, we would now have 2 glasses of contaminated water. True. When a person knows the truth of God's word, he or she can never compromise and be the same as before the compromise. Jesus and his word are the true waters of life. See John 4:14, Revelation chapter 21, 6, 22, 1, and 17. We cannot mix this water with the polluted streams of Islam, Hinduism, or Buddhism, New Age thought, psychology, paganism, witchcraft, etc. When we start to dialogue with these people and start to make concessions, we are forsaking the pure water of life. Compromise for the Christian always leads them further from the truth. It never leads them closer to the truth. The only party who gains in the dialogue is the non-Christian. They have nothing to lose by compromise, but the Christian has everything to lose by compromise. Jeremiah chapter 2:13 says, "For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living water, and hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold no water." Proverbs 5:15 through 17 says, "Drink waters out of thine own cistern, and running waters out of thy own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad, and rivers of water in the streets. Let them be only thine own, and not strangers with thee." 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17 warns, "Wherefore come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you." We have an instance in the Bible where King Ahab wanted to dialogue with Naboth about his vineyard. He said that he wanted to buy Naboth's inheritance. The offer he made seemed very reasonable and fair. Ahab offered him a choice of a better vineyard or to pay the worth of it in money. 1 Kings chapter 21 verse 2. Naboth wouldn't lose out on the deal, or would he? What was wrong with this offer? Just one problem. Naboth said to Ahab, "The Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee." 1 Kings chapter 21 verse 3. For Naboth the issue was settled. The Lord forbid the selling of one's inheritance, and no amount of dialogue or tempting offer could change God's command. This refusal cost Naboth his physical life, for Queen Jezebel got 2 false witnesses to lie about and testify against Naboth. These witnesses accused Naboth of blaspheming God. 1 Kings chapter 21 verse 13. Doesn't Satan always reverse things? Naboth was obeying God, but the false witness maligned with him and said that he blasphemed God. So Jezebel had him put to death. She then went to Ahab and told him to take possession of the vineyard. Yes, Naboth lost his physical life, but he gained eternal life. Ahab gained a physical possession, but he ended up in hell. These things shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into life eternal. Matthew 25:46. To the world it seems as though Naboth may have been a fool to risk losing his life, but Paul reminds us that we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. 2 Corinthians 4:18. For the Christian, this world is not the end, but now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 16. Emilio Castro. Dr. Emilio Castro was one of the 4 outstanding Latin American advocates of liberation theology who held high ranks at WCC. Castro, a graduate of Union Theological Seminary, was serving as the general secretary of the WCC when he referred to the writings of Karl Marx as including, quote, hopes and dreams about a new humanity and a future transformed for the better. He then went on to state that Marxists and Christians in significant measure share a common source for such longings, which makes it possible for them to do much better, unquote. No wonder when Castro was elected as the General Secretary of WCC, a KGB memo confirms that its agents supported Castro as a candidate acceptable to us, unquote. At the 1980 Melbourne, Australia conference of the Commission on World Mission and Evangelism, we find that Castro presented many heresies under the false theme of Your Kingdom Come, including false teaching that Christ's kingdom is already here. Communism was proposed as the answer to the poor since Christianity had failed, unquote. Castro in 1982 remarked, the philosophical basis of capitalism is evil, totally contrary to the gospel, unquote. In July 1989, the World Council of Churches Central Committee met in Moscow. There, Emilio Castro commented, quote, I might be tempted to quote some of the most beautiful pages of Karl Marx, dreaming of the new man, the new creature. He was dreaming out of the same biblical tradition from which we come. In that common dream, we hope that between us we will have many steps to take in common, unquote. Karl Marx's new man certainly was different than what the Bible reveals to us in 2 Corinthians 5:17. Quote, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. This same year, 1989, Castro signed the Declaration of World Thanksgiving from the Center for World Thanksgiving. Without going into detail, suffice it to say that this is an ungodly New Age interfaith organization which includes Muslims, Buddhists, Jews, Protestants, Catholics, etc. He also attended the World Day of Prayer for Peace, where Hindus, Buddhists, African tribal witch doctors, Togo snake handlers, and others met in Assisi, Italy, and prayed together for world peace. Welcoming this assortment of cultists and New Agers on this occasion was none other than Pope John Paul II. Castro was specifically called upon the churches to support the guerrilla movements. This refers to communist terrorist groups such as the African National Congress, ANC, and the South African Communist Party. In fact, Castro called for the WCC to funnel more money to get these terrorist groups. How does Billy Graham feel about Emilio Castro? Well, in Graham's autobiography, he writes that when he was in Uruguay in 1962, that Castro was the vice chairman of his Montevideo crusade. Billy Graham adds, quote, he stayed by my side throughout our visit, taking me everywhere in his little car. And years later, after Emilio Castro became prominent in the World Council of Churches, we did not always agree on theological points. On social affairs and social conscience, though, he did sharpen my thinking, unquote. Do you understand what you just read? Graham states that Castro and he did not always agree theologically, but that Castro's social meaning, communistic awareness, sharpened his thinking. During this crusade, Graham asked Castro to lead in prayer and referred to him as my great friend Castro. This is a man who believes that the God of the Buddhists is the same as our God, and who said it was very possible that man came from a monkey. Just 2 weeks before Graham's crusade in Montevideo, Castro was on a panel discussion TV where he kept excusing abortion. Yet the following week, Castro was once again on TV, this time announcing the Billy Graham crusade. Castro was greatly rewarded by receiving 40% of all the decision cards turned in. This was way back in 1962. Furthermore, we've seen some of Castro's belief on communism. Yet, in 1953, Graham declared, quote, the matter of communists among the clergy has largely been greatly exaggerated. All of this talk of communism in the church is undermining the confidence and faith of the people of the church. While there may be some left-wing sympathizers, I do not personally know any communist sympathizers in the rank of the clergy, unquote. Quote, in February 1986 issue of the North India Churchman, the World Council's declaration made at Zimbabwe was published. On the cover of that issue of the CNI's periodical was a photo of a worship service held during the Zimbabwe's meetings. In the photo, Emilio Castro, head of the WCC, is seen in the foreground with members of the consultation in the background, their arms held in the air, fists clenched in the traditional salute of international communism. The caption under the photo says, behind Emilio Castro, General Secretary, WCC, members of the South African delegation raising their fists in solidarity with the suffering black people in South Africa. Unquote. Does that remind you of anything that's happened within this last year? It should. It's all about communism, brothers and sisters. It has nothing to do with fighting for their rights at all. Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela is another person who uses the clenched fist. Quote, the media fails to tell us that Mandela's clenched fist salute is a symbol of the international communism. From media reports, one would gather that this is a salute in some kind of harmless chick image. Rather, it is the proud symbol of international communism, the same philosophy which is responsible for countless millions of murders and abominations against mankind. The clenched fist salute is the salute of the Castros, of the Lenins, of the Stalins, of the Maos, and of the butchers of North Korea. This is Mandela's crowd. Unquote. Hold on 1 minute. Okay. Another meeting was convened in Zimbabwe in February 1990, less than a week after Nelson Mandela was released from prison by the World Council of Churches. At this meeting, Emilio, quote, Castro described the subsequent release of Mandela as yet another act of courage by the South African president. His release is a significant achievement, unquote. In fact, quote, the call for Mandela's unconditional release has been a critical aspect of the WCC's strategy of mass mobilization against apartheid, said Castro, unquote. In a letter inviting Mandela to visit WCC headquarters in Geneva, Castro expressed gratitude to God, who has called you to this moment and to this task of negotiating the end of apartheid in order to bring to fruition the hopes of a new democratic and non-racial South Africa. Mandela also spoke at the 50th anniversary of the World Council of Churches in Zimbabwe in December 1998. Who is this Nelson Mandela that the World Council of Churches has called for his release from prison and who has been their speaker? For one thing, he is not a political prisoner, as has been reported, but he is a convicted terrorist. When he was arrested in 1962 at a farm in South Africa, police found 210,000 hand grenades, 48,000 landmines, 50 tons of high explosives, and the plans of 107 buildings and installations to be blown up, and a handwritten document entitled, How to Be a Good Communist. After he was released from serving a 27-year sentence, his first public speech was in Cape Town, South Africa, where the balcony, quote, was draped with the flag bearing the communist symbol of the hammer and the sickle. He repeatedly referred to his fellow ANC, African National Congress, members as comrades, and he praised the South African Communist Party and the memory of the great communists, he said, would be cherished for years to come, unquote. It is interesting to note that this communist credits, I don't know if I can say this person's name, but I know you guys don't know who I'm talking about, Medarita, the New Age Christ. I don't know, some yahoo over there that thinks he's Jesus. Marietta, maybe, the New Age Christ, for helping him to be released from prison. Mandela, the new Christ. In Mandela's document, How to Be a Good Communist, he states, quote, "We Communist Party members are the most advanced revolutionaries in modern history and are the contemporary fighting and driving force in changing society and the world. The people of South Africa, led by the South African Communist Party, will destroy capitalism and build in its place socialism. The transition from capitalism to socialism and the liberation of the working class cannot be effected by slow changes or by reforms, as reactionaries and liberals often advise, but by revolution. One must therefore be a revolutionary and not a reformist," unquote. Shortly after Mandela's release, one writer noted, quote, "In recent weeks, we have seen Nelson Mandela called a cold-blooded communist killer, an unrepentant adulterer who left his first wife and children, and an unrepentant terrorist, a hardline communist and a Marxist who refuses to renounce violence." Mandela, in his own handwriting, in a document in his 1964 trial for sabotage and treason, called himself a communist and revolutionary. Over half of his ANC's ruling council are Communist Party, SACP members, yet this man was accorded a hero's welcome in his 8-city tour of the U.S. He was honored by city councils, praised by mayors, received by our president, and addressed the UN and our Congress. Quote, "Our National Council of Churches gave him $200,000 to be used for the glorification of humanity." The NCC president said, "We are committed to being with you, Mr. Mandela." WCC head Emilio Castro praised him as a man who happens to love democracy. The WCC has funded the ANC at Riverside Church, Rockefeller's church. Mandela was called God's servant, moral leader of the world, our bright and morning star, and the Black Pope. But the Reverend Jesse Jackson's praise of this comrade, Arafat, Gaddafi, Castro, topped all this blasphemy. He called Mandela the new Christ. He compared his prison witness to the Apostle John's Patmos vision, his faith and the courage to Daniel and the 3 Hebrews, his release to Jesus' resurrection, and his suffering to Isaiah 53's suffering servant. One big promoter of Mandela and his African National Congress, ANC, is none other than David Rockefeller, who has been backing the ANC for more than a decade. In fact, one of Mandela's first stops in New York was to Rockefeller's Riverside Church. Forgive me. Another of his stops was a pilgrimage to the grave of Martin Luther King Jr., and one of Mandela's recent trips to the U.S., he called several times for a new world order and advocated a combined religion consisting of Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and even animists. WCC funds terrorist groups. Would you believe that between 1980 and 1985, the World Council of Churches had given over $362,000 to the ANC, which is headed by Nelson Mandela? By 1992, the WCC had given the ANC over $1.3 million in grants. This money was given in spite of the fact that the ANC was a military arm, which has openly and brazenly murdered hundreds of blacks in its terrorist movement to overthrow the nation's government. It is the ANC that uses the method of necklacing to burn to death those who oppose communist plans for South Africa. Necklacing has often been the preferred way of murder by ANC terrorists. Necklacing, quote, "is a hideous torture and terror method devised by the ANC communists in which an automobile tire filled with gasoline or diesel is placed around the neck of the victim, whose hands have either been chopped off or wired behind their backs. The necklace is then set aflame, and as the poor victims writhe in pain, the mob dances the toy-toy and stabs, stones, and kicks him or her. The ANC is publicly on record in their radio broadcast and their literature endorsing this barbaric practice. Over the last several years, around 1,000 black men, women, and children even have suffered this horrible death at the hands of the ANC mobs." Mandela's former wife, Winnie, said, quote, "Together, hand in hand with our boxes of matches and our necklaces, we shall liberate this country," unquote. On October 24th, 1993, the African National Congress, ANC, held a festival featuring 32 witch doctors who called on the spirits of the ancestors to bless Nelson Mandela, president of the ANC. This Kushia Impefpo, ceremony, in order to be valid, requires a ritual with human blood and flesh. This is the reason for many of the ritual murders in which body parts are removed, said reporter Ed Kane. The same is true for other forms of occultic practices and satanic worship. Mandela has endorsed Islam, received communion from the Roman Catholic Archbishop, and took part in a Hindu festival. The three people that Mandela admires are Yasser Arafat, Muammar Gaddafi, and Fidel Castro. He remarked, quote, "During all my years in prison, Cuba was an inspiration. The comrade Fidel Castro, a tower of strength. There is one thing where that country, Cuba, stands out head and shoulders above the rest. That is in its love for human." Oh my God. Oh boy. And human rights and liberty, unquote. In another speech, he commented, quote, "There are those who say to us, why don't you renounce Castro?" Mandela said, "No freedom fighter with integrity can desert friends who assisted him during the difficult times." Mandela also stated on the ABC network that Stalin, Lenin, and Mao were the greatest leaders in history. Mandela stated upon his release from prison, "I salute the South African Communist Party for its sterling contribution to the struggle for democracy." After all that's been said about Mandela, can you believe that an article in Christianity Today, Billy Graham's magazine, called Mandela a Christian? At Mandela's inauguration as president of South Africa on May 10th, 1994, let me reread that. I'm sorry. Something's just dumbfounded me. I'm sorry. At Mandela's inauguration as president of South Africa on May 10th, 1994, were such individuals as Hillary Clinton, Al and Tipper Gore, and Fidel Castro. Reportedly, the U.S. chipped in $35 million toward the festivities, a down payment on an initial $180 million to launch Mandela's regime. How does Billy Graham feel about Mandela? Graham himself has, quote, said that Mandela's victory and the events surrounding the election are a testimony to us all of this great man's resiliency in the face of 27 years of imprisonment, his faith in his country, his ability to command the respect of the people of all races in that country, and the ultimate triumph of good. He included, "I offer President Mandela not only my heartfelt congratulations, but also my prayers for his government, that it may be strong and just, and that he will have wisdom from God as he champions this nation's effort to bring equality to a nation that has suffered for many years under apartheid." I'm sorry, God, help me, Jesus. Help me, Jesus, not to get bitter toward people. Please, Jesus. Andrew Young, who was covered earlier in this new president of National Council of Churches, he was installed November 11th in the Catholic Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist in Cleveland. He said that Mandela is as close as being a saint as can be. The World Council of Churches has also given $85,000 to Marxist Robert Mugabe's Patriotic Front in Zimbabwe. Joshua Nikomo, mentioned in Chapter 2, was also with this group. More than 600 farms have been under attack by government-backed squatters who have murdered and beaten farmers and workers, set afire farm buildings, and added to a national panic and economic crisis. Mugabe has called these white farmers the enemies of the state. According to Time and Newsweek, Mugabe's guerrillas murdered Catholic and Pentecostal missionaries as well as Rhodesians defending the former regime. In addition to the funding of Mugabe's organization by the World Council of Churches, we find that at the WCC's 50th anniversary, they gave Mugabe a center stage, and its leaders continued to applaud his government. One of the speakers at this celebration was Julius Nyerere. He is a communist and was the former president of Tanzania. Program to Combat Racism. Since 1970, the Program to Combat Racism, a program under the auspices of the WCC, has distributed over $10 million to more than 130 organizations in some 30 countries, about half to which revolutionary Marxist movements in Africa. Returning to other World, Federal, and National Council of Church Leaders, we find that Dr. John C. Bennett, a member of the NCC and the WCC Executive Committee, said the following about Red China. Quote, "We cannot use our usual moral standards in assessing Red China. It deserves our reverence rather than our condemnation. Communism is to be seen as an instrument of modernization, of national unification, and increasing social welfare. Red China is the new savior for the poor nations of the earth." Unquote. The NCC, under the leadership of such men as Dr. John Bennett, voted 90-3 in 1966 to encourage the United Nations to accept Red China, which had slaughtered so many innocent people. Bennett also said, quote, "The tendency to co-sign non-Christians to eternal punishment is one of the worst abominations in Christian history." Unquote. Remember that Bennett was the former president of the Union Theological Seminary. Edward C. Lindman is a member of the FCC's Commission on Research. He noted the Christian religion is not a suitable religion for today. Unquote. George Buttrick, a former president of the Federal Council of Churches, 1940 to 1942, remarked, "A God who punishes men with fire and brimstone through all eternity would hardly be godlike. He would almost be satanic in cruelty." What? Did he really say that? "And childlike in imagination, like a nasty little boy pulling off wings of a fly." Unquote. In Buttrick's book, Christian Fact and Modern Doubt, he wrote, quote, "The future is hidden. We must be faithful to our ignorance. Jesus apparently conquered death, but we do not know. Why pretend we do? We covet the chance to say to God hereafter, if there be a God, 'Lord, they told us to grab the present gain, but there was more gain in staking life on grand, perhaps.'" What? Unquote. Buttrick believes that the Bible is full of contradictions and that the story of Adam and Eve is a myth, that the book of Daniel is a fraud, and that Christ did not die to save sinners, that man is not a fallen creature who needs to be born again, that God did not require an atoning Savior. Wow, he totally denies the gospel completely. Leslie Newbine was the first director of the Division of World Churches and World Missions and Evangelism for the World Council of Churches. Newbine leaned toward the belief in universalism, where all people will be saved. Obviously, he believed that there is salvation in non-Christian religions. In his book, The Open Secret, we find, quote, "Christians then, in dealing with men and women who do not acknowledge Jesus as Lord, will meet them and share with them in common life, not as strangers, but as those who live by the same life-giving word and in whom the same life-giving light shines." Unquote. Newbine also criticized capitalism. Yet, in spite of Newbine's unbiblical viewpoint, Billy Graham praised him at the NCC meeting in Miami, 1966. Virginia Ramey Malinat. Since many in leadership positions of the FCC, NCC, and WCC don't believe in the Bible, it's not hard to see why they have been instrumental in translating it to better fit their lifestyle and beliefs. One of these versions was the inclusive language lectionary produced by the NCC, which addresses God in feminine terms. A New Age group called the Cosmic Study Center wrote, quote, "Portrayal of a non-sexist deity by changing the language of the Bible from father to mother and father in the inclusive language lectionary, produced under the direction of the National Council of Churches, is an important change and the prelude to further clarification prophesied in the New Revelation by the Revelator himself, 1959, through William Ferguson." Virginia Ramsey Malincott served on this committee and was its editor. She also was a consultant for the NIV Translating Committee. This Bible has eliminated the most obviously gender-sided language for God. Lord becomes sovereign, Son of Man becomes the human one, and the references to God as he or him are eliminated by the repetition of the word God. Mallinckrodt is a self-professed lesbian. She held workshops for Kirkridge called Gay, Lesbian, and Christian, as well as authored a book named Sensuous Spirituality, Women, Men, and the Bible. This book tells of her spirit guide and her contact with her dead mother, which is necromancy. It also mentions her involvement with tarot cards and the I Ching, which is divination and forbidden by Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 through 12. She mentions her lesbianism and concludes that, in a very physical sense, we are all gay, we are all lesbian, we are all heterosexual, we are all bisexual, because we are all one. Unquote. Her view of the kingdom of God on earth is a society in which lesbian women, bisexual people, gay men are going to be accepted as first-class citizens in the church and in the society as a whole. In 1994, she published The Divine Feminine, the biblical imagery of God as female, which is sold by the blatantly occultic bookstore Samuel Weiser. This book states that because God is woman-like, women are godlike. Oh my God, have mercy. She also suggests that the Lord's Prayer might be addressed to Our Father, Mother, who is in heaven. Mallinckrodt and the occult. Another book she wrote entitled Is the Homosexual My Neighbor? In this book, co-authored with Letha Skenazy, she openly talks about her lesbianism and monistic belief in a female God. Quote, the book argues that sodomy account in Genesis does not teach the evil of homosexuality, but the evils of violent gang rape and inhospitality to strangers. The book also claims that the idea of a lifelong homosexual orientation or condition is never mentioned in the Bible, and that Romans 1 does not fit the case of a sincere homosexual Christian. Sadly, this book received favorable reviews in Christianity Today, Billy Graham's magazine. The Christian Century, the Journal of Evangelical Theological Society, and the Christian Ministry. As late in 1992, Christianity Today referred to Mallinckrodt as an evangelical author. Remember that prior to this date, Mallinckrodt was, quote, born again into a new spiritual freedom using I Ching, pagan Chinese divination, tarot cards, and the study of the New Age text, A Course in Miracles. She calls her experience of enlightenment both a coming out from fundamentalism and one distinct, holy instant, a notion taken from the A Course in Miracles. She admits, like my elder brother Jesus, I am sinless, self-traveling through eternity and temporarily having human experiences in a body known as Virginia Ramey Mallinckrodt. Perhaps myself, capital S she has been on earth before in other bodies, reincarnation. Perhaps not, unquote. Mallinckrodt's involvement with the homosexual and lesbian movement goes back to at least 1979, when she attended a conference at the largely gay Universal Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Church. Quote, in a report which was published by the Christian Century, September 26, 1979, Mallinckrodt stated that the most grateful celebration of Christ I had ever attended. In 1985, she openly admitted that she was a lesbian. Quote, in October of that year, her signature appeared on a statement supporting homosexuality, which was published in Sojourners magazine. Quote, in 1987, Mallinckrodt wrote an article claiming that refusal to ordain homosexual clergy women is unscriptural discrimination. She wrote, to ask lesbians and gay men to pretend they are like the majority is to deny the self-identification and affirmation that is natural legacy of every healthy adult. Forcing gay Christians into silence also denies them the opportunity to celebrate in gratitude to God for their authentic nature and for their life-enriching mutual relationship with a loving partner, unquote. In June 1991, she stated, my lesbianism has always been a part of me. I tried to be heterosexual. I married myself off. But what I did ultimately realize was that God created me as I was, and that this is where life was meaningful. The first time she publicly admitted that she was a lesbian was before none other than the governing board of the National Council of Churches. Yet the very next year, 1992, Christianity Today tried to convince us that Mallinckrodt is evangelical. When TV's Ellen announced her lesbianism, Malincott said, quote, I came of age in the 1940s and 1950s, discovering my own sexuality at a time when only negative information was available to me. I was one of many gay teenagers who have attempted suicide because we cannot fit in. One of those to whom Ellen dedicated her dual outcoming. When the show ended, I sat thinking about the parties all over the country. I thought of the many gay women and men celebrating because perhaps the most public affirmation we had ever received, unquote. Just last year, she signed a declaration called the Religious Declaration on Sexual Morality, Justice, and Healing, which was briefly covered in the last chapter, sponsored by SIECUS, calling for same-sex unions, ordination of homosexuals, and abortion rights. Malincott in the NIV. Since Malincott is so vocal about her lesbianism, it's no surprise to find that the New International Version, NIV, for which she was a stylist, reflects her bias. I'll list just a few examples. Deuteronomy 23:17 warns, there shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel. The NIV changes this to, no Israelite man or woman is to become a shrine prostitute. 1 Kings 14:24 reads, and there were sodomites in the land. The NIV states there were even male shrine prostitutes in the land. The NIV goes so far as to condemn to hell those who call against homosexual behavior. In the King James Bible, in 1 Corinthians 6:9, we find, know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind. This verse tells us that effeminate or homosexuals cannot enter heaven. But the NIV declares, do you not know that the wicked will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor male prostitutes, nor homosexual offenders. Did you catch that? Those who offend the homosexual offenders, are the ones who cannot enter heaven. That's the Christians who are barred from heaven, at least according to the NIV. Malincott is also pro-abortion and promotes adultery. Malincott also claims that Jesus was a woman. In fact, during a news conference at the National Council of Churches Governing Board, she said, you might be interested to know that Jesus remained chromosomally female throughout life. God herself. At the 1993 Reimaging Conference, covered in the last chapter, where Malincott was one of the speakers, she said that women would worship God herself, give honor to every world religion, and agree that everything that lives is holy. She claimed that Jesus' death was the ultimate in child abuse and a model for human child abuse. As an incest survivor, I can no longer worship in a theological context that depicts God as an abusive parent and Jesus as the obedient, trustant child, she declared. As a speech given to the International Clout Gathering, Christian Lesbians Out Together by Malincott was entitled, Horrorlessly Implementing the Political Vision of the Christ Sophia. She stated, we are the horrors of Jesus the Christ, Sophia's place in time, and Jesus receives us, depended upon our assistance, and broke bread with us. Doesn't some of this stuff just angers you to no core? I mean, I'm not kidding. Okay. In 1998, former General Secretary and WCC President Conrad Reiser had urged acceptance of the homosexual agenda at the conference in Amsterdam, a center of homosexuality. Reiser, incidentally, is also supportive of the program to combat racism, which gives millions of dollars to communist and violent groups. Regarding other religions, he remarked, we as Christians have to be humble and listen to the wisdom of Eastern religions, especially Buddhism, which has had much to say on peace and nonviolence. He also was a signer of the Universal Declaration of Human Responsibilities. Quote, Razor warns against aggressive evangelism by missionaries and says they ought to focus instead on being agents of reconciliation. Aggressively seeking conversions to Jesus Christ, Razor said, has led to conflicts between Christians and Muslims and people of other faiths. Razor wants to continue the ecumenical dialogue with the Roman Catholic Church, but he added that the WCC does not agree with the Pope on moral issues such as abortion and euthanasia. In April 1996, Razor met with Pope John Paul II at the Vatican and said a fresh spirit exists between the WCC and the Roman Catholic Church. Dr. Eugene Stockwell was the Associate General for the Overseas Ministries with the NCC and the chairman of the WCC's Commission on World Mission and Evangelism. In 1989, at the WCC World Conference on Mission and Evangelism in San Antonio, Texas, where he gave the keynote address, quote, Stockwell was rejoicing in the fact that, for the first time, religious leaders from several religions were present as consultants, not visitors. These included 2 Hindus, 2 Muslims, 2 Jews, a Buddhist, a Sikh, a Jain, and 3 people of traditional religions, unquote. He believes that people from non-Christian religions will receive eternal life. His response to the question, is Christ the only way, was no. Jesus is not the only way. If that is taken to mean that all who do not name the name of Jesus have lost the way, have no passport to heaven. He adds that Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, Zoroastrians, Jains, etc. are not created by another God than the one we worship. They are sisters and brothers, flesh of our flesh, life of our life. Time and time again they espouse great ideas and live by them, something we Christians often fail to do, unquote. Is Jesus the only way? S. Wesley Arajah is a director of the WCC. He, too, answered the question, is Jesus the only way? His reply was, quote, Jesus makes no claim to divinity or to oneness with God. He does not suggest himself to be a mediator, much less the only mediator between God and men. Thus, can a Christian turn around and say to the Buddhist that he or she is misguided? We have no grounds to do so, unquote. The Bible clearly teaches that Jesus was God. John 10:30 says, I and my Father are one. After Jesus said this, the Jews were ready to stone him. The reason they gave was that they were going to stone him for blasphemy, because that thou, being a man, makest thyself God. 10:33 in John. They obviously understood Jesus' statement to mean that he was God, but Arajah asserts that Jesus makes no claim to divinity or to oneness with God. Paul tells us in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5, that there is one God and one mediator between God and men, and that man, Christ Jesus. Jesus himself also said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. John chapter 14, verse 6. Since Arajah doesn't accept Jesus as the only way, it's no surprise to see that he has signed the Declaration of World Thanksgiving, and that he has especially interested in a united religions organization. In 1998 WCC meeting in Harare, Zimbabwe, an Anglican priest told the group that one of the young people in his church, whom he had trained 25 years ago, is now a Buddhist monk. I am delighted that one of my parishioners became a Buddhist. That shows he is growing, he declared. There was also a meeting place for discussion on gay and lesbian issues. The session was led by 2 homosexual leaders who summarized their research on sexual orientation, recounted a sexual orientation history from the homosexual point of view, and divided the participants into small groups to share their gay lesbian experiences. One of the booths set up at the WCC defended and promoted lesbianism. The Bible study booklet used as a guideline for the participants was given to everyone in attendance. Quote, one chapter was titled, We May Be Called Dogs, But its setting and imagery discussed that Jesus had with 6 women, one of whom was the Syrophoenician woman who had a daughter with great needs. This woman Jesus rebuked and said that she felt sad and ashamed after Jesus said, "It is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to dogs." She asked, "Why did you call me a dog, according to the author of the study guide?" Jesus responded, "I am sorry I said that. I was brought up in such a discriminatory society. I use that kind of language without thinking. I am a man, and because of my privilege, I did not realize how insulting was my comment, but I was afraid. I had to be careful of the powerful religious leaders, the priests and the scribes and Pharisees who wanted to find fault and judge me, so I had to watch what I said." He then apologized for abusing this Syrophoenician woman, unquote. The booklet also said that Jesus saying to the woman, "I repent of my indifferences, my weaknesses, my fear, my pride, my unkind behavior, and my exclusive language in front of you. Thank you for teaching me," unquote. I'm about ready to be done now. I'm sorry. This is really getting to me. Okay. The WCC refused to criticize homosexuality, and the Zimbabwean government did decide to allow their country WCC delegates who were part of the gay and lesbian organizations. But the discussion about this continued to come to the surface. At a press conference, Dr. Koyama, a leader of the WCC Faith and Order Commission and also a professor at Union Theological Seminary in New York, was questioned by one of the young ladies who was present. Dr. Koyama later revealed that he had at least 15 homosexuals in his classes at Union Theological Seminary. When some WCC leaders were asked to define sin, the answers were discrimination against lesbians is sin and racism is a sin, but nothing of the definition God gives in His Word was ever offered. Wow. In the spring 2001 issue of Clout Reach, standing for Christian Lesbians Out, we see that Mab Zegrest, a lesbian and a founding director of North Carolinians Against Racism and Religious Violence. Oh, she also served as coordinator of the Urban Rural Mission, a program of the World Council of Churches. Ongoing revelation. Marga Burig, who was involved in the feminist movement as well as one of the co-presidents of the World Council of Churches, she said that most male theologians are afraid to admit that the Bible might not only be the only source of revelation. Let's see. I'm sorry, I had to stop for a minute. That there is also an ongoing revelation. They are afraid of women claiming their power, unquote. She also brags, quote, "In recent years, I've grown more focused on bringing together the questions of women and minorities with gay and lesbian concerns, refugee concerns, peace concerns. I'm a member of Women for Peace in Switzerland. These questions all belong together. We must always try to make connections between the different areas where oppression takes place," unquote. At one forum where the focus was on women, Burig was one of the women who was honored, along with Faye Waddleton, former president of Planned Parenthood in 1986, Humanist of the Year, Jan Goodall, Marianne Wright Elderman, who is activist in the National and World Council of Churches, the ACLU, the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee, former director of the Americans for Democratic Action, a CFR member, plenary speaker at Gorbachev's 1996 State of the World Forum, signer of the Cry for Renewal document, the president of the leftist Children's Defense Fund, and whose son is a Rhodes Scholar, etc. Quote, "Each participant and media representative at the forum was given a charm called Women's Night Dance with a cord to thread it on and chain around one's neck. The pennant showed a circle of female witches dancing in the moonlight, a primal symbol of female energy. According to the attached card, the moon is female and her phases echo the phases of life. The stars are also female, as in the night itself. A woman's ceremony acted out under the sky's protective energy is still an important way to summon the primordial energy of feminine power," unquote. In 1984, the WCC, Lutheran World Federation, World Student Christian Federation, and the World Young Women's Christian Association, YWCA, jointly published a book called No Longer Strangers. The book contains poems which repeatedly refer to God as a woman. For instance, in Blessing the Bread, we find, "In the beginning was God. In the beginning, the source of all that is. In the beginning, God journeying, God moaning, God laboring, God rejoicing, and God loved what she had made, and God said, it is good." In I believe, reference is made to the Mother, Father, Spirit, God again mentioned in the feminine sense, where God is called Baker Woman. In 1995, there was a UN World Conference, an NGO forum on women held in Beijing. This, quote, conference outlined a pseudo-sexuality in which men were portrayed as villains, patriarchy, including biblical male headship, assaulted in seminar after seminar, lesbian rights pushed with no official resistance, and access to abortion and birth control promoted with zeal. The writing of the platform document for the conference was supervised by former U.S. Member of Congress Bella Abzug, an arch feminist. Abzug also led a workshop in Beijing, which was observed by a reporter from the Washington Times. Quote, Mrs. Abzug, in one of more than 350 workshops on the second day of the forum, joined hands with other women in a prayer tribute to Mother Earth that mocked Orthodox Christian belief. Give thanks for the fruits of life, said a Brazilian delegate who led the group in prayer. Thanks to Mother Earth for you give life. Thanks for water. People from my community decided no more crucifixion. We believe in life. We celebrate life, not the crucifixion. We are power. Mr. Abzug, Mrs. Abzug, I called her Mr. Mrs. Abzug and several dozen women holding hands, then thrust their hands into the air, chanting, I am power, I am power, I am power. I'm going to stop it there because I was just hoping lightning would strike them, but it did not. And I'm going to stop that there. I will pick it up tomorrow. I can only handle so much of this, and we are going on an hour of this reading. And I don't know about you, but it certainly troubles my spirit to know that so many people in government, so many people that Billy Graham said were great Christians were nothing but heretic, apostate, false God worshipers, and he called them Christians, and he gave them all the thumbs up, basically. So I've got to end it there for this evening. I love you all so very, very much. As always, please go to the Lord in prayer. Seek his face. Ask him for wisdom. Ask him for discernment. Ask him to direct your steps. Get in the word of God because it is the light unto our pathway. Is it not? It is. I love you all so very much. Keep your eyes on Jesus, your nose in the book, which is the Word of God, and embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts so you will not sin against God or you will not be deceived. Be blessed, brothers and sisters. Be blessed.